Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This week in the Torah, we are reading a portion called Tavo. Tomorrow morning, Sophia is going to teach us a bit more about what inspired her from this week's Torah portion. But I wanted to begin a little bit of an exploration tonight on some issues I think are very important, not only for us at this season and at this time, but I would add at this point in our world. This week's Torah portion includes the following lines. Some of you might be familiar with them, some of you might not be so familiar with them. They are, my ancestor was a wandering Aramean. This text from this week's Torah portion is actually at the heart of the Passover Seder. It begins much of our explanation. What is our story about? Our story is about a group of people who really have walked and wandered and traveled the globe. There are Jewish communities on every continent and on Antarctica. I am sure there's got to be 2 or 3 Jewish scientists right now on Antarctica. But that being said, this idea reminds us of our humble start. Where did we all come from and how did we get here? And we should never forget it. That's what we'll hear again and again. To be a people who are mobile, but a people who can see the struggle then of everyone else in the world who has been forced, moved, set into refugee status or whatever it might be to push you to the fringes of society. Our story says that was us. We were taken from one place, said, go over there. And then you get there, you don't belong in Egypt. You got to go someplace else. Great. Where do we go? My father, my ancestor, my people were wandering Arameans. I don't even know where Aramea is they're talking about, but that's where we started. It's somewhere in the Middle East, I'm sure. In the portion, it goes on to say, you need to make sure that you would hear and pay attention to the following individuals in your community: the poor, the orphan, the widow, the resident alien among you, and the stranger. Now, in modern terms, just in contemporary terms, the poor I can understand, the widow, the childless, the orphan, I understand that the parentless, the person without a spouse, the resident alien amongst you. For us, in the history of Judaism, those were the people that were with us, that weren't necessarily Jewish, but they traveled with us and they were part of where we were. They were like residents, but they weren't quite 100% citizens. Think how many people are like that in our world, in our country, in our county, in our state. And then we get to the stranger, which to me is like a whole other category. That's the person that your instinct goes, that's a stranger. And our Torah says, bring them close. Do not say, stranger danger. Our Torah says, it's all about us. We're gonna bring people in with a big hug. We love community. How do we build a just society? So I actually watched a film this past week with Rachel at our home called The Beautiful Game. It is a fictionalized account of the World Cup for homeless. A World Cup in soccer that is only for the homeless people of the world. Founded in 1999. This tournament was first held in 2003 in Austria. The international game has grown, is played every year with people from around the globe. The purpose of the program by its founders is to instill a sense of value, skills, camaraderie, socialization for people who have been forced onto the margins. And if you saw them on the street, you probably wouldn't say, would you like to play a game of soccer? Imagine the power of this game. Thousands and thousands of homeless individuals the world over. United States, Canada, England, Rwanda, Afghanistan, South Africa, the whole world. In the United States, what I see is a history of immigration, a history of what we are going to call a refugee movement. Who are the people on the fringes we heard about? the homeless. Who else? The poor, the stranger among you. What does it say at the base of the Statue of Liberty? Written by Emma Lazarus, a great Jewish person. Bring us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, not your wealthy, well-dressed, and well-heeled. We don't throw that one around so much. We should be. But what we're saying is our country, our basis here is on the people who've come to live in this country. So it brings me to something very important that I've heard recently, which is there are Haitians, people from Haiti, who are living in our country as refugees, legally, here, invited, supported by our government, by our people, because we know they're in danger. That's what refugee status means. Look on to those who rely on the goodwill of everyone else to be alive in this world in 2024. I'm inspired to take action at times like these. So I thought it might be interesting to think for a moment where we can take action. The one place I know of in the Jewish community is the Jewish Family Services. There are organizations that serve a number of purposes. They offer counseling services, elderly services, school services, and refugee resettlement services. Partnering with organizations like HIAS, which is a direct immigration group to get people to the country, the Jewish Family Services helps get people into the country, acculturated, with jobs, with education, and integrated into our society. The Jewish Family Services is in Massachusetts, in Springfield, Massachusetts, where I lived for a number of years. When I was living there, we were resettling refugees from Somalia, where there was a little Somalia that had formed and there was restaurants that were opening up. The Jewish Family Services was in charge of resettling the Muslim Somali refugees into the community. There was nothing better for anybody than having the connection of a Muslim immigration worker in the Jewish Family Services office, helping people get integrated into our country and knowing that it's a Jewish community that's helping. Just think about where our world is and the power of what that means. Boston, Connecticut, Springfield, Massachusetts have resettled, as of right now, over 1,000 refugee families. In San Diego, the Jewish Family Services of San Diego, is anybody here familiar with their work? It's the most radical Jewish family services I know, because they don't only work with the legal immigrants and the legal residents. They will help anyone who's in this country that needs assistance, whether they're here by accident or on purpose, to make sure that they can be safe. And whether that's going back or staying here, I can't imagine the power of what that means to serve. Locally, I've only got here 7 weeks ago, so I only can know from what I know in 7 weeks. The Jewish Family Services of Long Beach and Orange County is who works locally with resettling refugees. We're expecting at least 15 refugees over the course of the next months of this year, and probably triple in the following year at least. That situation's constantly changing. If you're interested in helping, there's donations that can be made that are financial, but there's also very physical help that's needed. Sometimes it's providing physical goods. Sometimes it's training someone in English, being a friend. In my family, my grandparents were refugees that came to this country after the Second World War, after the Holocaust. My great uncle on my grandmother's side, my Uncle Lou, was in a DP camp in Italy. And he didn't know that there were any family left. So he went to a Red Cross book, and they said, look through the Red Cross book and see if you can see a family name. My grandmother wasn't thinking when she signed the book, and she signed her married name. My great uncle saw her handwriting and said, that's my sister. 2 years after my grandparents got here, my great uncle got here. My mother, my uncle, and my grandparents in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx refit it so that my great uncle could be there and have his own room and space. So that the next year he could leave, so that my great aunt and her 3 children could move into that same apartment as refugees. The fact that we help each other get here, to me, is the most powerful thing we can all do. Later in my life, my stepfather and my mother had just come back from a trip to China in around 1989. Any of you know what happened in China around 1989? It was very soon after Tiananmen Square massacre. Our family took in Julie. Julie was a refugee from China. She was an engineer. She spoke no English. She lived in my house for 4 years. She is a working engineer in the state of Pennsylvania, remarried, has a life. For me, those are like the lessons of what it means to help people come, establish, and be here in this country to make it a great place. I learned that from our Torah portion. I learned that from my history. I learned it from my family, but I learned it in this portion. Bring in the orphan, bring in the stranger, the resident alien, the stranger, the refugee to your midst. I hope we feel the inspiration to look around our world, and when you see a way to help those who are the most needy, those refugees that have nothing, that have left to get here and start over again, that we open our hearts. That when we come to Rosh Hashanah in 2 weeks, this portion that we're going to hear read tomorrow on the Bima by Sophia is really specifically placed to teach us these values. So when we get to Rosh Hashanah, we're like, yeah, we are ready. Shabbat Shalom.